Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and today we have a special guest. It is Dave Gahary. He is the author, also a journalist. Has written and studied extensively on the attack by Israel on the USS Liberty back in 1967. In fact, that was June 8th, 1967 that this attack occurred. There were 34 sailors killed on the ship here. I think it was 171, something like that. There were actually injured. There has been all types of stories about the USS Liberty, cover-ups, Israel never fully acknowledging their part in this attack, brushing it kind of under the rug, just saying it was an accident. We mistaken them for an Egyptian ship, and that happened there. And then, of course, the U.S. government as well. That seems to be the bigger mystery in this than anything. 18 hours after this ship had been attacked, they were still stranded in the water waiting for the help that was actually only 20 minutes away. At least that's some of the reports that we've seen out there. Everything from President Lyndon B. Johnson saying he wanted the GD ship at the bottom of the sea. And some of these things are not necessarily true, or at least the evidence doesn't support that. And we want to get into those things and really uncover what actually happened and hopefully get some answers and maybe get the U.S. government and the Israeli government to actually step forward and really uncover and explain what really happened and give these survivors a peace of mind. There is actually in the progress right now with Mr. Gahary, Dave Gahary, and some of the survivors there of the USS Liberty, a full-length motion picture that they're working on. And in fact, at the end of this broadcast, you will see the trailer for that, and of course, the way that you can help support that if that is something you so desire to do.
Egyptian Jewish spy was Cohen, Eli Cohen, who was hung in a square in Egypt. One of the things that he did was he became friendly with the Egyptian military, and on the Sinai, he feigned concern for the soldiers that it was very hot out there, and he would plant some trees there so they could get some shade. Well, they were just targeting markers for the attack. So this attack was planned many years in advance, this attack on Egypt, which caught them by surprise, and Israel even admitted that they weren't threatened by Egypt. I think it was Prime Minister Begin who said, we have to admit to ourselves, Egypt was no threat. They weren't going to attack us, we attacked them. I think that was in 1982.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, that's an admission. And you know, the thing is, it's funny you bring this out, Dave, because in the research I've done on all the prime ministers of Israel, Menachem Begin was the one prime minister that upset the carrot cart, you might say. He was the only one that did not have a direct connection with the Vatican. He was the one that was in opposition in the beginning in 1948 of the creation of the State of Israel. He was the one that brought the Altalena. He wanted to liberate Jerusalem. He believed that this was part of our homeland, that we should liberate this. Including, I mean, you had Ben Gurion, Moshe Sharit, you had Golda Meir, every one of these, all of our prime ministers prior to that and even after him had connections with Rome. And it's like he slipped into the government and no one expected it. So to hear him actually come out and say, Egypt was not a threat, it makes sense because he's the only one. Even though, I mean, granted, you know, he kind of had the view too, you know, oh, I want to take Lebanon and places like that. But he seemed to be the more honest one, regardless of what his intentions were. He seemed to be more honest about things. And so that's interesting that he brought that out. I did not know that.
Yes, absolutely. The United States was in a position, as far as Israel was concerned, to be able to monitor their electronic communications. So they warned the United States to get the Liberty out. Supposedly the messages went out, get 100 miles away from the shore, get out, okay? Liberty never got the messages. The next day comes around, June 8th, and early in the morning, I think something like 6 in the morning, the surveillance flights start, where Israel is surveilling the Liberty. And it occurred all throughout the morning up until I think around 12 o'clock maybe. So for about 6 hours they were being surveilled by what are called flying boxcars, they called them. Because they look like train.
Was there any more communication then at that point there? Israel is surveilling this spy ship, or listening ship, however you want to call it, and for 6 hours. So you would think at this point here, if Israel's already given one message there, they would be once again warning the United States, your ship is still within 12 miles of our shore. We need that ship out of here. Any of that information ever spoken again?
No. They warned the day before. They figured that they got the warning through, and the United States was just ignoring the warning, and their ship's in international waters. It's clearly flying a U.S. flag. It has every right to be in international waters. They didn't have anything to worry about. The captain of the ship, Commander McGonigal, requested a destroyer escort, and he was turned down for the reason that you're flying a U.S. flag. Nobody's going to bother you. That's your protection. So 6 hours of surveillance by these flying boxcars, by these French Nor-Atlas planes. And remember, the United States was not supplying Israel with a lot of weapons at the time. Again, Israel didn't really like them, and many people in Israel still don't like the United States because they blame the United States for the Holocaust. And there's a lot of people in the United States who don't like Israel. And there's a lot of people in the United States who don't believe that the Holocaust unfolded the way that the powers that be wanted to unfold. So there's a lot of things that weigh on this story, and there's a lot of reasons why somebody might want to think that Johnson said what, a lot of people think he said, and we'll get to that. So here Israel is looking at a U.S. ship. There is no formal agreement. They're not allies. They're not getting a lot of weapons from the United States. They're getting most of their weapons from France. Prior to that, they got it from Soviet-controlled Czechoslovakia, or Soviet-influenced Czechoslovakia. I think it wasn't until Prague Spring was in 1968, where, and of course that's you're very familiar with that. And so what happened was, here's this ship. They don't know. Could it pick up Israeli communications? Maybe. Could it spoil their plan to go into Syria? Maybe. Was Egypt, or did Egypt and Jordan request a ceasefire in the United Nations? Yes. Did the Israelis agree to the ceasefire? Yes. Did the Israelis violate the ceasefire? Yes. There was duplicitousness all throughout this 6-day war from the Israeli side. So here's another bit of intrigue, that without the permission of the United States, Israel was going to go into Syria and take care of this problem once and for all. Right? Again, just like now. So let's hit this ship. Let's take this ship out. Let's make sure that it cannot transmit any messages about our plans to go into Syria or our plans to murder in cold blood these several hundred Egyptian prisoners of war. So again, just dealing with the facts, one of the puzzles of the Liberty is the attack by the jet aircraft. Around 2 o'clock, it was, I think, 1358, so almost 1400 hours. The first wave, the jets came in, and these were French-built Mirage 3 I think Dassault was the company, or is the company, it's still around. And a significant part of the attack by the planes, which all the Liberty guys say were unmarked, was that in a few seconds, now remember they surveilled the plane for 6 hours, they knew that it was the USS Liberty. They had it in the war room in Tel Aviv. They had it plotted on a graph, USS Liberty. They looked in Jane's fighting ships and they saw what it was. They knew what it was able to do. They knew because the day before, again, they warned the United States to get out. What they say is part of their lame excuses to that they didn't know it was the Liberty, which, as you could tell now more than ever from everything I'm saying, it would be impossible for them to not know it was the USS Liberty. Even if they were next to the Liberty was a huge cargo ship. They were next to it and they saw the USS Liberty painted on the stern and GTR-5 on the bow. There would be no mistaking it, especially from the perspective of a motor torpedo boat. It's so clear. You don't even have to pretend that you can't see the flag. Look at that. Look at this ship. It's distinctive. It's not an Egyptian horse carrier, the El Qasir. It's clearly a U.S. Navy ship. It's not Egyptian because they don't use English lettering. They would use Arabic. You're trying to tell me that the Israeli Air Force and Navy, one of the most sophisticated armed forces in the world, and even back then they were very sophisticated, they made that mistake? No. It's an insult that they said that. So they knew that the Liberty was there. But the most significant part of this attack, I think, is that the jets, the Mirages, the French Mirages came in, and in, I was told 2 seconds, but let's even say it was 5 seconds. When they launched their missiles, in 5 seconds, they took out all of the antennae except for one.
Well, that tells you right there that there was a deliberate attempt to stop any listening in capabilities whatsoever. And that does seem to, David also seems to speak to what you're saying to start with in your theory that you put forth from the evidence that you have. So I don't want to just downplay it as a theory, but the fact that they didn't want the U.S. listening into what they were doing. If they're going to take out all the antennas, and that's got to be an amazing feat in itself to take out 44 of the 45 antennas on this ship here. But then it gets worse, though. It's not just that they're going to target the antennas. This really gets much worse.
It does. And they didn't get 45 because one antenna was down for repair, and so it wasn't generating a heat signature. So they couldn't lock onto that. So they hit the 45. Not only did they hit the antennae, but the Liberty was equipped with 4 50 caliber machine guns in what were called gun tubs. So they could have one guy there. It was used to repel boarders. So if you see those videos online nowadays where the Navy's out there and the Somali pirates are trying to, which is incredible that happens, but that's what it would be used for, because they were off the coast of Africa, and this has been going on for hundreds of years. You know, pirates try to board ships, and many times they're successful. So a Browning M2, a 50 caliber machine gun, is not a weapon to be used against, obviously, another Navy vessel or an attack aircraft. It's used to repel boarders. So that's all the Liberty had. And also, besides the fact that it was, as they say, virtually unarmed because of that, it was also unarmored. Nobody really talks about that. It had no armor. Those bullets were whizzing through the entire ship because there was nothing to stop it. There was no armor. It was a cargo ship. So they knocked out all of the antennae except for one. They also hit every watertight door. They hit all the gun tubs. They murdered the sailors who were in the gun tubs, who had manned those positions. The rockets went through the gun tubs and through the sailors, leaving basically chunks of body and blood in the gun tubs. After they expended all of their ammunition, and they didn't have any heavy bombs on board their planes. After they expended all their ammunition, they took off and they were replaced by some super Mystiers, which are French as well, fighter bombers. And they continued to rake the ship with 20, 30, 40 caliber machine gun fire, rockets, cannons, and also napalm. They actually dropped napalm on the ship. So you know what napalm is.
Oh, absolutely.
The listeners know what napalm is.
That's when you're trying to burn everybody alive. I mean, it is unbelievable. And I have heard Phil talk about this in the interviews before. Napalm was being dropped. I mean, you know, Dave, the facts are, I mean, just what you've said thus far. When you target one, you're taking out all the communication equipment, so you have no ability to be able to spy on anybody or anything in the region. Then you're targeting the very doors that keep that ship from sinking. That's obvious there. And then you destroy all the means of escaping. You know, in other words, you're making sure that there's going to be no survivors. You're trying to make sure you kill all the survivors with napalm, those that have survived the attack thus far, because you've got 34 dead, 171 wounded.
Well, not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Right now we've only got let's say 8 dead, because one died below decks. The executive officer died below decks. A 35-year-old, I think, father of 5. Armstrong. He died. He was still alive. But napalm, what it does is it creates winds up to, I think, 700 miles per hour. And besides the damage that it could do to a human skin, it actually sucks the air out of your lungs. And it asphyxiates you. It actually takes the air out of your body. So that's why when I was saying, Stephen, no matter what you want to say about the Liberty, it was a vicious terror attack, massacre. There's no way to mitigate that.
No, there's not. There's not.
No.
Sadly enough, and this is one thing, guys, listen, as you guys are listening to this, we need to get answers. We need to challenge the Israeli government. Yehuda Glick, MK Yehuda Glick, I mean, we know Yehuda Glick personally. There needs to be answers for the survivors of the USS Liberty, their families as well, those that have perished in this tragedy, as is called by the survivors, a massacre. There needs to be answers, and of course, it's not just the Israeli government. They're the ones that carried out the crime against the USS Liberty. But then we also have the U.S. government. We're going to get into in just a moment as well, and their complicity in covering this up.
That's right. Israel committed the crime, but most of the survivors really have a bone to pick with their own government, because what they did was beyond reproach, and what they continue to do. So they expended all their ammunition. The ship still did not sink. As the story goes, and there are questions as to whether or not it's accurate, I don't believe it is, from my research. And my research isn't just in books, but it's also interviewing survivors, and I've interviewed many of them. And you could tell that a lot of them came to the aid of the same guy who was wounded, who ended up dying, which I'm sure they don't know. They'll know when they read the book. But supposedly, one of the sailors on board identified the antenna that wasn't hit because it wasn't generating a heat signature, put a coaxial cable to it, and got the SOS off. Well, the people on the Liberty were trying to get an SOS off right away, right after the attack started. The problem was that Israel was jamming the frequencies. And they weren't just jamming the tactical frequencies, but they were also jamming the international maritime distress frequencies. And again, there is no way to mitigate this fact. They didn't want anyone to survive, as you mentioned. They wanted everyone dead. They wanted them at the bottom. Vicious. How could they do this? Again, not an ally, and not a country that particularly cared for the United States. But how could they do this? How could they drop napalm? Remember, there were service members sunbathing on the deck of the Liberty when the attack began. They know that. They saw it. They took photographs of it.
You know, Dave, this is where, and let me just throw this in here, because I think that even the survivors need to be aware of this as well. With this sinister past that we have had in our country coming together, and I know some people really believe that it was all done a wonderful thing and that Israel became a nation, but there's been some very strange things that we've uncovered on Israeli News Live, and we have seen the evidence that has been put forth time and time again where some of the, I like to call it, as it's called by many people out there, the Zionist leaders, not Israelis that would be your best friend, that would love you and care for you, that came there trying to escape the tragedy they suffered in Europe to begin with. But we're talking about leaders that were selling out other Jews just so that they could get to Palestine and start a nation. The Bielski family, Michael Bielski, sharing with me personally how his own father was told that if any Jews tried to go to Jerusalem, that he was to hold this position and he was to murder and kill every Jew that ever tried, even thought about going towards Jerusalem. So if there's a sinister plot like that amongst some of the elites inside the government, and there again, I don't think that every person in the Israeli government is like this. We saw that, well, I won't go into that all right now, but the thing is we have some very serious issues that go on at the elite part of the Israeli government that would be willing to give commands. Because, you know, even as I heard the USS, the story of the USS Liberty, we know that the one Israeli pilot radios back, and I guess that was Yitzhak Spector, that said, but it's an American ship. You know, obviously he didn't want to attack an American ship, regardless of maybe what his feelings would be, but the order comes back, sink it anyway. You know, what about what happened with the Altalena? This was a ship full of Jews going to liberate, with all the military equipment coming from Europe after World War II, wanting to liberate Jerusalem. But Rabin, directed by Moshe Sharit and Ben Gurion, tell Rabin, sink the Altalena. You know, here's the thing, Dave, they don't care. If you're a Jew, you're American, if you're in the way for whatever this agenda is, this greater Zionist project, which at the end of the day is going to be a new world order, and Jerusalem's going to be the capital of the United, you know, with a UN force guarding it. And I think that's what's about to come out, the plan here in the very near future. This is why, unfortunately, this has happened to these sailors and these civilians, the Marines that were there. This is why they lost their life. There is a far deeper issue at play, and that's what we're trying to uncover ourselves and expose that evil so that not every Jew that's in the world gets stuck with this reputation because, of course, not all Jews are like that. We have groups in Israel today that Breaking the Silence is one of those that is trying to expose the evils that are being done that's coming from the top to perpetrate evils on Palestinians, etc. So, very troubling.
It is, you're right. And, you know, as I said, I have Israeli colleagues who I care very much about, and they're doing everything they can to make the world a better place. But what happened was that the Liberty and the radio operators, the radio men, were trying to get the SOS off. You know, we're under attack. Any station, this net, this is Rockstar. Rockstar was the name, the code name of the Liberty. All ships had their own code names. They still do. Like, for example, the Saratoga was Schematic. You know, any station, this net, you know, network, this is Rockstar. We are under attack by unknown jet aircraft. And so it was repeating over and over again. The problem was that because the Israelis were jamming all the frequencies, the message wasn't coming over clearly. If it wasn't for the keen ear of a radioman aboard the Saratoga, who I interviewed, the message might not have ever got through. It probably would not have got through. But because he heard what he heard, and even though it was garbled, and the other people said, nah, that's nothing, he was a radio geek, and he heard this, and he said, it sounds like there's a pattern to that. And he stated his, it was coming over the voice network, which they never use, and he was a junior, you know, a real junior guy, and they just assigned him to that. Like, you're never gonna, nobody transmits over that, you're never gonna pick anything up, and he picked that up. So they got the message through. The skipper of the Saratoga, the USS Saratoga, the aircraft carrier, launched or turned his carrier into the wind, as they say, to scramble these jets to come to the aid of the Liberty. They were about 500 miles away, and F-4 Phantom can do over 1,600 miles an hour. Figure that out. They could have been there pretty quickly.
Yeah, in 20 minutes.
What's that?
20 minutes.
No, they could have been there in no time at all. Would it have been enough time to stop what was about to happen next? Probably not. And one of the reasons was because, and you'll see this in a lot of these false flags and these operations, these black operations like 9/11, you'll see that there were, I think, something like 40-something war games going on at the same time as the 9/11 false flag operation occurred. And there were war games going on with the 6th Fleet, who were just off the coast of Crete. And so the problem was that a lot of these planes were equipped with nuclear weapons. And so there was a lot of screw up about how are they going to get certain planes off of their deck, which planes are they going to launch. But they did send planes out, and because they sent planes out, they had to notify the White House that this was happening, and then the planes were recalled.
Jeez.
More jets were scrambled, and they were thinking, oh, maybe it's because we had some jets, or we had some planes that had nuclear weapons on them. Maybe it was just a screw up in Washington. Some dimwit bureaucrat didn't understand. They got some more planes out, and that's when Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara ordered the planes back, and Rear Admiral Lawrence Geis, who was in charge of the carrier group 60, he wanted confirmation of that order to get the planes back. He said basically he challenged the order, and he said to McNamara, "Sonny, you're not big enough nor man enough to get me to call back planes that are going to the aid of a Navy ship." And that's when LBJ got on the line. And he said to the Rear Admiral, "You get those planes back now, or you're going to be pushing pencils. I will not embarrass an ally over a few dead sailors." And they called the planes back. And as you said, the Liberty languished for almost 18 hours before help arrived. What kind of a government, we're talking about the U.S. government now, What kind of a government would do that to their own people?
Dave, that's what brings it to this point right here as well. The evidence that you have provided thus far shows obviously that the Israeli government intended on this ship not only being disarmed where it could no longer have communications, which if they wanted to do that and end it at that to make their point, they could have, but then they shoot out the doors that keep the ship from sinking. They destroy their life-preserving capabilities. They drop napalm, trying to annihilate everybody on the ship. Without a doubt, wanting that ship to sink is the obvious what was actually going on there. Now, if we take that into account, and then you see the U.S. government under President Johnson demand that the planes be turned back, and he's not going to let it embarrass Israel over a few dead sailors when he probably had a little bit better intel by then. But the mere fact that 18 hours go by when, from what I've gathered, it was only 20 minutes away that they could have gotten help to the USS Liberty, that shows what would you want to call it? A conspiracy between Israel and the United States leaders there, that obviously they wanted this ship on the bottom so that they could justify a new story. Regardless, I know, like you said, there's the stories that float around that this was really just Israel trying to get the U.S. to come into the war. But from the evidence, it's not so much looking like that. It looks more like, okay, Israel bombed the ship, but now let's cover it up so no one knows why, or maybe even blame it on someone else that it was sunk, but for a different cause altogether.
But it gets worse. See, this is the thing. All of this is horrible as it is. Of course, it's horrible talking about it. I get emotional talking about it because of what I know. I know Phil gets emotional talking about it. You're obviously getting emotional hearing about it. It's troubling when another human being does this to another human being. When any life is treated like this, whether it's a human or an animal, another animal, or an insect, people stop in the road when they see a turtle crossing. I know I do.
Sure.
A snake. It just happened here in the United States. A couple of cops stopped traffic for a snake to slither across the road. So anytime a life is hurt, it hurts other people. And the whole story up to this point would have been bad enough. But after the planes left, and after the planes were recalled, then 3 Israeli wood-hulled, French-built motor torpedo boats approached the Liberty in attack formation. Now, up to this point, the Liberty guys had no idea who was attacking them. And again, whether it was the fact that the planes were just moving too fast to identify who they were, or the fact that they were unmarked, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever find out. But they didn't know it was Israel. As a matter of fact, on the Liberty, many of the service members were staunch supporters of Israel. They knew what was going on. They heard the chatter over the radio that this war broke out, and they were rooting for Israel. Many of them had made Israeli flags that they had on their desk or their workspace. They were rooting for Israel to kick the butts of the Arabs. They didn't like the Arabs. They thought, obviously, why would they ever think that Israel attacked them? They were probably under the mistaken impression that Israel was an ally, as well as most people are, unless and until they study it. The motor torpedo boats were approaching, and the middle one was flying an Israeli flag. And many of the Liberty guys thought that they were coming to help. Well, they launched 5 torpedoes. Each boat carried 2 torpedoes, so one of them I believe, only had one. These torpedoes were German-made. They were reformatted. They were originally used from planes that would drop torpedoes. They were reformatted to work on motor torpedo boats. They had never hit a target. These particular torpedoes throughout the entire history of the Israeli Navy. One even that was launched, it actually turned around and caused the ship that launched it to get hit and to explode. So they weren't very sophisticated. Unfortunately, one of the 5 hit the Liberty right on the starboard, which is the right side. There's a port in the starboard. The way that people can remember is port has 4 letters, and so does left. So they hit on the starboard side, right in what they call amidships, and it blew approximately a 40 by 40 foot hole into the Liberty. Almost immediately killed 25 men, boys. As I said, 2 Marines, 1 civilian, and the rest of them, the 22 others, were sailors, part of the Naval Security Group. They were communications technicians. There was a lot of sub-ratings in that particular rate of communications technicians. They had people who did repair on the equipment. They had linguists. They had people who did operations. So they murdered 25 Americans with the torpedo. They weren't happy with that. They approached the ship. Like I said, it was clear. It would be clear to anyone that was a U.S. ship. Once you see the Liberty from that position, you can see that it's a U.S. ship. They continued to fire their weapons into the Liberty, the skin of the Liberty, targeting the boiler, because they knew that if the boiler was pierced and seawater hit the boiler, the cold seawater hit the boiler, then it would cause a massive eruption, and that would sink the ship. So they were still intent on sinking the ship. They did that for a while. I would say about a half hour. There were Navy guys on board who were peering around the bulkheads and different parts of the ship, and they would swing their guns around from the motor torpedo boat to target them. They were shooting not just the ship, they were shooting at sailors attempting to put fires out on board. They were also shooting at sailors attempting to rescue the wounded, which is a war crime. This is a violation of the Geneva Conventions. They were also, the Geneva Conventions were designed to protect civilians in time of war, or service members during time of war. So this violated the Geneva Conventions. Another thing that they did was the planes had done a great job of destroying the life rafts. Well, the last 3 life rafts were thrown overboard because they gave the order to abandon ship because it was listing very badly. They didn't know what would happen. And the motor torpedo boats shot all of the life rafts that they threw overboard, and they even scooped one up and brought it aboard as Phil says, as a trophy of their kill. So they continued to rake the ship with automatic machine gun fire to try to pierce the boiler to sink it, and they ran out of ammo, apparently, and they took off. So they were unable to sink it. Incredible. The next thing, and again, there's no way to mitigate the facts of firing on stretcher bearers and firefighters and life rafts. This was done. Ruthless, vicious, inhumane. I can't fathom it. I know you can't fathom it, Stephen.
No.
Most people can't fathom how a fellow human being would treat another fellow human being like this. After they left, the vessel, which was obviously on fire, smoking badly, listing, I think by 12 degrees, two Super Frelon, which is a French word for hornet, helicopters approached the Liberty. One of them hovered over the ship. They couldn't land because of all the antennae, but they had commandos aboard who were getting ready to rappel down with their weapons like Uzis and finish the job. Phil actually was one of the guys who had tried to go below decks and break into the small arms locker because the master at arms was the only one with the key to open up the lock there, and they couldn't get it open. So they had nothing to defend themselves against the helicopter. Phil, in his frustration, gave the middle finger to the commando who had his legs dangling out of the chopper, who was getting ready to come down and murder every American on board, and that fella gave Phil the middle finger back. So, yeah, what is believed is that at that time they were called back, obviously, because they were preparing to come down and go, hand to hand and just go throughout the ship, murder everyone, and then scuttle the ship and sink it. They wanted it sunk bad. Why they didn't use a heavy bomb, I have no idea, but they didn't, because one heavy bomb would have done the trick. So, for some reason, some inexplicable reason, as quick as they got there, they took off. And the next thing that the Liberty guys saw was another Super Frelon coming in. This time, it held the person of Commander Ernest C. Castle, I think it was C, the defense attaché in Tel Aviv, who had the, I don't know what you would call it, but gall. He's over the ship in the helicopter. He could see the blood and guts. The ship is moving and sloshing, and there's blood literally comes streaking down the bulkhead, sloshing on the deck. He throws down a bag, a paper bag, with a couple of oranges in it, with his business card, in which he scrawled on the back of the card 3 words: "Have you casualties?"
That's insane.
Insane. The bag was grabbed by one of the sailors who I've interviewed. He brought it up to the captain. The captain was so angry when he saw that, he shooed them away. "Get out of here, get out." And of course, the next thing that happened was the next morning at 6, 7 in the morning was when they finally got help. While the attack had occurred, they turned the mess decks where sailors, such as myself, eat chow. It's the galley. They turned the mess decks into a hospital. And every table had a body on it. There was screaming and moaning, and that's where the XO, Lieutenant Commander Armstrong, perished on board. He was fine. Phil was talking to him. He asked him for a cigarette. He was asking how everybody is. When Phil came back, he had expired. It was the doctor on board, Dr. Kiefer. They weren't supposed to have a doctor. The only reason they had a doctor was because on the previous cruise, one of the sailors got a case of appendicitis, and they had a very risky a mission to get him off in Africa. So they decided to put a doctor on board. Thank goodness, because this doctor worked for the entire time on his feet, trying to save lives. And he had a life vest, what they called a Mae West, a life vest around him the entire time. And Phil and a lot of the other guys were thinking that the reason that he was wearing that life vest was because he was afraid that, in case the ship sunk, that he would be safe. As a matter of fact, most of the sailors and most of the service members were afraid of that night, and many of them were afraid to sleep below decks just because of that reason, and they slept on the deck of the ship. The reason that Dr. Kiefer was wearing that life vest was because he was hit by shrapnel and his guts were pouring out of his body.
Oh,
and he was using that to hold his guts in, while he stayed on his feet for that entire time, helping as many boys as he could. So the incredible misery that was created by Israel, the Israeli military, on this one ship, not just on the people who were murdered and the survivors, but their family members, the parents who had to live with the knowledge that their child was killed. I'm a dad, you are. I can't imagine. I hear it's the worst thing to have a child, you lose a child while you're still alive as a parent. The misery that was created by this terror attack, and the insult, the disgrace that was perpetuated by their own U.S. government, who covered this up at the highest levels in the executive branch, and it's continued to be covered up 51 years plus after this happened. And one of the worst parts about it is that the USS Liberty is the highest decorated ship in the history of the United States Navy for a single action. And every U.S. school child should know about this ship, but because of the power of the Israel lobby and the allegiance to Israel by certain elements in the United States government, and the fact that the Navy itself didn't want this information getting out because it was embarrassing, all of these things are conspiring to keep this story buried, which is why, no matter what, not just the book, but we're getting this out in the movies, and when this does come out, when people sit down with their popcorn and their Coke, and they see a true story coming across the screen, and they see what happened to this ship, they see what Israel did to it, how they did it to it, they see what their own government did, how they covered it up, how they're still covering it up, how the USS Liberty is the most decorated ship in the history of the United States Navy for a single engagement, and they didn't know about it, and their kids didn't know about it, and nobody knows about it. That's going to do something. That's going to create a situation where that's going to be a game changer. And that's why it's so important to make sure this story never gets out.
Absolutely. You know, Dave, listen, I know we're late in time here, and we're going to pick this up in another interview in the very near future. Guys, I'll tell you something. There's many of you out there that carry some weight. This story's got to be brought to the public attention. It's got to be brought to, in the United States, congressmen, senators, whoever you have, whoever you may know, that we can get this story brought up, get the answers for the survivors and for the families of those that passed away. Many of them elderly in their 70s, 80s. I know that Dave, I've talked to him about this before. We'll do it on another interview. But he has interviewed many of the survivors, including officers on the ship as well. One officer that's extremely elderly now, so he does have these first-hand accounts. And as far as for our Israeli brothers and sisters, you know, this is a tragedy that this has happened, and that our country still has not come forward and just has kind of brushed this under the rug. I know Haaretz covered a story on that. Dave has shared with me, though, the story that Haaretz has written out there. There are some inconsistencies in that story as well. But nonetheless, this, and that was back, I think, in 2017. Just last year that came out. This has got to be dealt with. This can't just be brushed under the rug. We've got to deal with this. You know, judgment begins first at our own home, in our own house. We have to deal with this, and this has got to be made right for these survivors. And Dave, I can't speak for every Israeli, but I do come from both parents being Jewish. My last name Ben-Nun is, my family has war heroes in Israel, as they would call them, on my father's side. But from my perspective, I want to say to you and to the survivors of this and the families, you know, our deep regret of what has happened and what Israel has done. And my desire is that those that can make a better apology on behalf of the Israeli people, that they will come forward and they will do the right thing. And that, as well as an American, I'm also an American citizen as well, that the American government also will do the right thing and get this where it should be. And that there should be no more hindrance and no more burying of this story. It's got to come out. Dave, can you share with the people how they can help support? I know that you guys are still working on the fundraising for this motion picture that you're putting together. I know that's very costly. I know when they did the motion picture on the Bielski family, Michael told me it was a very costly endeavor to do that. How people could help support that. And then after you say that, you guys, on the conclusion, I'm going to share with you in this video here the actual trailer that they put together where the survivors talk about what they're doing to bring the attention to this to the world.
Sure, thank you, Stephen. Well, the book, Erasing the Liberty, can be found at, so easy, erasingtheliberty.com. So if you go to erasingtheliberty.com, you'll see the book there. That is, the homepage is an image of an ad that we took out in the New York Times holiday book review section. So a supporter of the Liberty approached me and he said, Dave, I have $500,000 to give you just to market the book. And that was the first ad that we took out on December 3rd in the New York Times. The holiday book review comes in every Sunday, New York Times. The New York Times has, well, the daily, which is not the Sunday, obviously, has about 500,000 circulation. The Sunday has about 1.1 million. So 1.1 million people got that holiday book review. It was something, it was a big one. It's the biggest one of the year. I think it was 60-something pages, and we had that ad taken out in there. So that brought this matter to the attention of a lot of people. And that's what it's going to take, Stephen, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. And I know why you're doing what you're doing, and I honor what you're doing. If we had all the money in the world, it wouldn't be a problem. Obviously, we could just get it done. That's what I always say. If I had the money, it's not a problem. But we don't. And one of the worst things is that you see all of these Hollywood types, these actors and actresses, they literally do have all the money in the world. But what are they doing with all the money in the world? Are they doing anything good? I don't know. Maybe they are. I really don't see it. I don't watch television. I don't watch this stuff. But I know that the movies that are put out are garbage, just pure garbage. Could you imagine? See, that's why we don't even need the story about, but I don't believe it anyway, Johnson saying, I want that GD ship down at the bottom of the ocean. We don't even need that. All we need are the facts of this thing.
Yes.
Just the facts of this story will make the hair stand up on the back of people's necks. And that is a beautiful thing. The truth is a beautiful thing. Facts are there's nothing more beautiful than that.
Yes.
That I could read a book and learn and read stuff and facts, and it's true. And then I can take what I know and I can talk about it like we're doing now, like I did and as you did. So if you get the book, which is what we want everybody to do, you go to erasingtheliberty.com and click on the book, and you can buy it right there. I think it's $25 and then $5 shipping in the United States, and we ship all over the world. So it's different, obviously, rates to different countries, but it's all based on weight. So for some reason, the United States has high shipping rates relative to other countries. I don't know why that is, but for example, I think to go to Canada it's $18. To go to somewhere in Europe it's like 25. I guess to Israel too. We don't control that amount to ship. So
get it on Amazon.com. Get them to carry the book, and then, like for example, Amazon has agreements in Europe to where they would print it and ship it from Europe, and you would cut the cost of the shipping down.
That's right. That's exactly right. That is one thing. However, the problem is that because the book is being utilized as a way to fund the movie, so every bit of money that's brought in goes into the account for the film. It's not used by me, it's not used by Phil, it's not used by anyone. It just sits there waiting to be used, either to purchase more books or to market for the film or to travel to different areas of the country or world, which we're going in September to San Antonio to a conference we were invited to. So we would use the funds that are donated or the funds that are procured from sales of the book to, for example, fly. I'm going to fly from here where I'm at to San Antonio. I could get a round trip flight for I think $289. You can't beat that. You know, so that's what the money is used for us to talk in front of people. To bring this story, like we talked about today, to other people across the country and across the world. So the best way to do it is get the book, and the reason that's the best way is because you can learn about it, number one. And then what we found is that when people do get the book, they'll find out about the Liberty, and then they'll go to the website, either erasingtheliberty.com, which I just mentioned, and click on the movie tab, or go directly to usslibertymovie.com and click on the donate tab after they watch the trailer, which you're going to show. So that's the way to do it. The project is not a charity, so it's not an IRS approved charity. It's not a nonprofit. Those things just are too complex. This money is going to be used for the production, the pre-production, the production, and the post-production, and the marketing of the movie. That's all it's there for. Phil and I feel the same. It's not our money. People aren't giving their hard-earned money to us to use in any other way except for the movie. We know the people who donate the money because we receive stuff in the mail, and a lot of times they're coming from apartments. These are people who don't have a lot of money. They're giving you $10, $20, $30 when they could use it for something else. So we take this very seriously. We're not here to make money off of the movie. We're not here to make money off of the book. We're here simply to use the book as a funding vehicle for the movie. This year, though, I'll be traveling around, as will Phil, and we'll be talking to other entities and other sources about getting the movie fully funded. It would be great if it was just fully funded by people across the world, just normal people like us, who could give $1 or $5 or $10 or whatever. We just got a check the other day in the mail for $500, which is a pretty big donation, you know, relatively. And the fellow was in the Navy also. He did the same thing that these spies did. He wasn't there, obviously, but the story resonated with him. So he read the book and then he made the donation. Some people will just make the donation first and not want the book. Many people make a donation and say, keep the book, don't send the book, use it all for the movie. Because we used to have it where if you made a certain amount of donation, you would get a book. That's different now. But people would say, I don't want the book. And I would say, I want you to read the book because it's important that you know this knowledge.
Exactly.
So many years went into producing this book. So that's the way to do it. Those two websites, erasingtheliberty.com, they could see the book right there, and usslibertymovie.com. They could see this trailer you're about to show and also make a donation.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's great to have you on, and of course that's on the screen for you guys to be able to see that as well, the website there that you can do that. Also on YouTube, we'll have this in the description below where you can just take and copy and paste that URL into your search bar. Thank you for watching Israeli News Live. Erev Tov and Shalom Shalom. In a world of Ein Shalom, there is no peace. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live.
Next summer, June 2017, marks the 50th anniversary of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. In order to honor our fallen brothers
and to spread the word about our search for answers,
a group of veterans of the USS Liberty, in association with a passionate group of filmmakers, are in pre-production on a feature film about the attack and the aftermath.
We are planning to release this film to commemorate the 50th anniversary of this attack.
we're going to use the latest filmmaking technology
And special effects to bring our story to life in a way never before possible. A feature film based on the attack on the USS Liberty
and the veterans' search for truth.
is finally being made.
We need your help to produce this important independent film.
And make this movie as spectacular as possible. Your donation will enable us to recreate our story with blockbuster production value on the big screen.
Our story has never been told like this before.
Most Americans don't know about the USS Liberty. By creating a major motion picture, we believe the story of the Liberty will reach millions of people in a way never before possible. Help us tell our story of survival and the search for answers. Donate to the USS Liberty Film Project today.
This is the last opportunity for Liberty survivors to accomplish this extraordinary task.
Help us tell our story. Visit USSLibertyMovie.com and support the fundraising effort. We veterans of the USS Liberty thank you for your generosity.